The fuel gauge needle trembled just above empty as hurricane-force wind slammed against the helicopter's frame. I had exactly two choices: follow orders and turn back, saving myself and my crew, or descend into hell to rescue 3 stranded paramedics and their critical patients. The radio crackled with my supervisor's final warning. "Jackson, you return to base now or don't bother coming back at all." I killed the radio. Some decisions aren't really decisions at all. When you've pulled bleeding Marines from hot zones while bullets pinged off your bird's underbelly, the math becomes simple. Lives outweigh rules. Every time. My name is Captain Daniel Jackson, and this is how I lost everything I'd rebuilt and found something worth far more. The first signs of Hurricane Eliza appeared on weather radars 8 days earlier. Just another tropical depression spinning off the African coast, they said. Nothing to worry about. By day 3, it had swallowed enough warm Atlantic water to become something monstrous. By day 5, evacuation orders blanketed Florida's Gulf Coast. I'd been flying air ambulance helicopters for MediLift Emergency Services for nearly 3 years by then. After 2 tours in Afghanistan as a Black Hawk pilot, civilian life had felt hollow, purposeless. Flying critical patients through stormy nights gave me back that essential feeling that what I did mattered. That lives depended on my skill, my judgment, my nerve. MediLift operated out of Tampa General, with a fleet of 6 emergency response helicopters serving the greater Tampa Bay area. Our director, Lawrence Brenner, ran the operation with corporate precision. Former military himself, Air Force, which explained a lot. He believed in protocols, hierarchies, and the unquestionable authority of the chain of command. "We're not cowboys here, Jackson," he'd warned during my interview. "We operate by the book or not at all." I'd nodded, agreeing to his face while thinking of all the times the book would have left good people dead in the dust of Kandahar province. But I needed the job, needed to fly, needed to matter again. So I smiled and played along. For 3 years, I'd kept my mouth shut when decisions seemed questionable. I'd filed flight plans exactly as required. I'd maintained the precise fuel reserves mandated by company policy. I'd become the model employee, decorated veteran turned reliable civilian, until Hurricane Eliza changed everything. The morning of the hurricane's landfall, I woke before dawn to the sound of rain hammering against my apartment windows. The wind already howled through Tampa's streets, toppling trash cans and sending debris skittering across pavement. My phone buzzed with an emergency alert. All non-essential personnel ordered to evacuate or shelter in place. I wasn't non-essential. At the hospital helipad, chaos reigned. Nurses rushed last-minute transfers into waiting ambulances. Doctors argued over-triage priorities. My crew, Elena Rodriguez, flight nurse extraordinaire, and Marcus Chen, the best paramedic I'd ever worked with, were already prepping our bird, a Eurocopter EC-145. Brenner intercepted me before I could reach them. "You've got 3 hours maximum," he said, rainwater streaming down his face despite the shelter of the helipad awning. "After that, I'm grounding all flights. This storm's accelerating faster than predicted. Category 4 now, possible 5 by nightfall." "Understood," I replied, though I was already calculating how many runs we could squeeze in. 3 hours wouldn't be enough. "I mean it, Jackson. When I call you back, you come back. No heroics." I gave him my most obedient nod and headed for the helicopter. Elena raised an eyebrow as I climbed into the pilot's seat. "He giving you the no heroics speech again?" "Does he have any other speeches?" I adjusted my headset and began pre-flight checks. "He's got the 'I'm not paying overtime' one," Marcus chimed in from the back, "and the 'file your paperwork on time' classic." Despite the storm raging around us, I felt that familiar calm settle over me, the clarity that came with purpose. We had a job to do. People needed us. Everything else was just noise. For the first 2 hours, we ferried critical patients from smaller facilities in the path of the storm to Tampa General and other inland hospitals. The wind grew stronger with each run, the rain heavier, visibility worse. But the EC-145 was a sturdy bird, and I'd flown through worse in the Hindu Kush. Then came the call that changed everything. MediLift 1, this is Bayshore Community Medical Center. We have multiple critical patients requiring immediate evacuation. Building damage sustained, power failing, requesting immediate assistance. I checked our fuel gauge, 65% remaining. Enough for the trip to Bayshore and back with the standard 30% reserve. I glanced at the navigation screen. Bayshore sat directly in the hurricane's path in a mandatory evacuation zone. Dispatch, this is MediLift 1. We copy Bayshore's request and are en route. The dispatcher's voice crackled with static. Be advised, MediLift 1, you're approaching your recall time. Director Brenner has ordered all units back to base in 20 minutes. Copy that, dispatch. We'll make it quick. Elena shot me a look. We both knew quick wouldn't be possible. Not with multiple critical patients to load and transport through deteriorating conditions. Your call, Captain, she said quietly. Some people think courage means never feeling fear. They're wrong. Courage is feeling the fear and making the right choice anyway. As the helicopter banked toward Bayshore, my mouth went dry and my heart pounded against my ribs. Not from fear of the storm, but from what awaited when we returned. If we returned. The scene at Bayshore was apocalyptic. Part of the roof had collapsed. Ambulances were stranded in the flooded parking lot. Medical staff waved frantically from the helipad, hunched against the driving rain. I brought the EC-145 down with a gentleness belying the violence of the wind. The moment we touched down, Elena and Marcus leapt out, running toward the waiting staff. Through the rain-streaked windshield, I watched them conferring, saw Elena's gestures growing more animated. When they returned, Marcus's face told me everything. 5 critical patients, he shouted over the roar of the rotors and wind. 2 ventilator-dependent, 1 pediatric trauma, plus 3 paramedics stranded when their ambulance flooded. We can take 4 max, I replied. Our helicopter wasn't designed for such a load. Elena's eyes met mine. They say the building's not going to last the night. The rest of the evac vehicles can't get through the flooding. My radio crackled. MediLift 1, this is Director Brenner. Return to base immediately. Repeat. Immediate recall. Storm surge accelerating beyond projections. I stared at the fuel gauge, at the radar showing the hurricane's eye wall approaching, at the desperate faces of the medical staff on the helipad. MediLift 1, acknowledge recall order. I picked up the radio. Negative, dispatch, we have critical patients requiring evacuation, proceeding with loading. That is a direct order, Jackson. The window for safe return is closing. Then I'll find another window. I switched off the radio. Elena's hand touched my shoulder. Dan, if we take all of them, we won't have enough fuel to make it back to Tampa General. I know, I said. That's why we're not going to Tampa General. We overloaded the helicopter with 5 patients plus 3 paramedics in addition to our crew. The EC-145 groaned as we lifted off, straining against the wind and the extra weight. I'd never pushed a civilian aircraft so hard. Instead of heading back to Tampa, I turned northwest, toward a small regional airport where I knew we could refuel. It would be tight, dangerously tight, but possible. Elena worked furiously in the back, stabilizing patients alongside Marcus and the Bayshore paramedics. One of them, a young woman named Sarah, kept glancing fearfully at the pediatric patient, a boy of about 8 with a broken arm and possible internal injuries. He's going to make it, I heard her promise the child. Our pilot's the best. He got shot down in Afghanistan and still landed safely. Not quite true. We'd taken heavy fire but never actually been shot down. But I appreciated the vote of confidence. The regional airport came into view just as our fuel warning light began to flash. The landing wasn't pretty, more of a controlled crash than a proper touchdown, but we made it. Airport staff rushed out with fuel trucks while we transferred patients to waiting ambulances. The boy with the broken arm grabbed my sleeve as they loaded him. You fly like in the video games, he said, his face pale but eyes bright with adrenaline. Better, I winked. In video games, you get extra lives. Once the patients were safely away, we refueled and headed back out. By now, the hurricane's full fury had engulfed the coast. Flying became a brutal negotiation between machine and nature, with little margin for error. Twice, downdrafts nearly slammed us into the ground. The helicopter's frame shuddered with each gust, instruments flickering. When we finally reached Tampa General, Brenner was waiting on the helipad, face contorted with fury even through the sheeting rain. I cut the engines and stepped out, legs wobbly with exhaustion. "In my office," he shouted over the wind. "Now!" "You disobeyed a direct order." Brenner's voice was dangerously quiet as he paced behind his desk. "You endangered yourself, your crew, and company equipment worth millions. You violated FAA regulations on flight time during severe weather events." I stood at attention, old, military habits resurfacing. "Yes, sir." "Don't sir me, Jackson. This isn't the Army. You can't just go rogue when you feel like it. With respect, Director, those people would have died. That's not your call to make." His fist slammed onto the desk. "We have protocols for a reason. Risk assessments, chain of command. Without them, we're just cowboys with helicopters." Elena stepped forward. She and Marcus had insisted on joining me for this dressing down. "The protocols would have left 8 people to die, sir." Brenner's glare could have melted steel. "I'm not debating this. You're suspended pending review, Jackson. Turn in your credentials." My hands didn't shake as I unclipped my MediLift ID and placed it on his desk. 10 years in the military had taught me to mask emotion, to lock it away where it couldn't interfere with the mission. But inside, something broke. Flying wasn't just my job. It was my identity, my purpose, my way back from the darkness that had followed me home from war. "The review is a formality," Brenner continued. "I'll be recommending termination." Marcus stepped forward. "Then you'll need to fire me too." I supported the captain's decision completely. "And me," Elena added. Brenner's face reddened. "This isn't a democracy. Get out, all of you, and Jackson—" His voice dropped to a hiss. "I'll make sure you never fly air ambulance again. Not in this state, not anywhere." Outside, the hurricane raged on, indifferent to human drama. We stood in the hospital corridor, silence stretching between us. "I'm sorry," I finally said. "You shouldn't have put your jobs on the line." Elena snorted. "Don't flatter yourself, we did it for those patients." Marcus grinned. "Besides, I've been wanting to tell Brenner off for years. Corporate medicine is killing people with its spreadsheets and protocols." I should have felt devastated. Instead, I felt oddly liberated. Drinks on me then. Once this hurricane blows over. What I didn't know then was that the storm outside was nothing compared to what awaited us in its aftermath. 3 days later, Hurricane Eliza had moved inland, weakening to a tropical depression that drenched the Carolinas. Tampa began the long process of assessing damage and rebuilding. I spent those days in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, fighting the creeping sense of purposelessness that had nearly consumed me after leaving the military. The knock on my door came just after noon on the 4th day. I expected Elena or Marcus, maybe with that promised drink. Instead, I found Sarah, the paramedic from Bayshore, flanked by a middle-aged couple. "Captain Jackson?" The man stepped forward, hand extended. "I'm Robert Mercer. This is my wife, John. Our son, Tommy, was the boy with the broken arm." I shook his hand automatically, confused by their presence. "We wanted to thank you personally," Jean said, eyes glistening. "The doctor said if Tommy hadn't reached the trauma center when he did." She trailed off, unable to finish. Sarah filled the silence. "They told us what happened, that you might lose your job because of us." "It was my decision," I said simply. Robert's grip on my hand tightened. "A decision that saved our son's life. So now we need to know, what can we do to help you?" I invited them in more out of politeness than expectation. But as Sarah explained the situation in detail, Brenner's threats, the suspension, the likely termination, something remarkable happened. Robert Mercer's face set with determination. "This isn't right," he declared. "My brother's a reporter for the Tampa Tribune. The public should know what happened." "The media won't care," I said bitterly. "Man does job, gets fired for breaking rules. That's not news." Jean Mercer's gaze was steady. "Hero veteran saves lives during hurricane, while corporate bureaucrats, Hide in offices. That's very much news, Captain Jackson. Within 24 hours, the story broke, not just in the Tampa Tribune but across local television. Robert's brother turned out to be an excellent storyteller, painting a vivid contrast between my combat-honed decision-making and corporate inflexibility. By the second day, national outlets had picked it up. By the third, Funkerfly Jacksonfly was trending on social media. Patients from that night came forward with testimonials. The parents of the ventilator-dependent patient created an online petition demanding my reinstatement. Veterans groups expressed outrage. Even politicians, sensing which way the wind blew, began making statements about American heroes and bureaucratic overreach. MediLift's corporate headquarters issued a tepid statement. We are reviewing the incident in question and remain committed to patient safety and regulatory compliance. The pressure mounted. Protesters gathered outside Tampa General with signs reading, "Protocols don't save lives, pilots do," and "Who would you want flying in a storm?" On the seventh day, my phone rang. It was Brenner. "This has gotten out of hand, Jackson," he said without preamble. "The board is concerned about the public relations impact." I imagine they are. They're offering reinstatement, full back pay, clean record. All you need to do is issue a joint statement acknowledging the importance of protocols while recognizing the extraordinary circumstances. I let the silence stretch, savoring the moment. Then, "No." "Excuse me?" I said no. "I don't want to come back." Brenner's confusion was audible. "Don't be stupid, Jackson. This is your career we're talking about." "Exactly. My career. My choice." I hung up. The media attention brought something unexpected. Opportunities. Job offers from private aviation companies. Speaking requests from medical conferences. A book deal. But none of it felt right. None of it addressed the fundamental problem. The gap between what emergency response systems needed and what they had. The revelation came during a late-night conversation with Elena and Marcus at a bar near the hospital. They'd both quit MediLift in solidarity, though I'd begged them not to. "The system's broken," Marcus was saying, nursing his third beer. "It's all liability concerns and profit margins. Nobody's training people for the real stuff. The judgment calls, the impossible situations." Elena nodded. "In nursing school, they drill protocols into you, but in the field you learn that sometimes protocols kill. There's no class for that." "There should be," I said quietly. They both looked at me. There should be a class for that, a school, somewhere that teaches not just the technical skills but the judgment, the decision-making under pressure, the human factor. Elena leaned forward. "Are you thinking what I think you're thinking?" Maybe. Ideas were crystallizing, possibilities taking shape. We have the expertise, the experience, the real-world know-how that no textbook covers. Marcus grinned. "Rescue Pilot Academy, Jackson School for Rule-Breaking Heroes?" Something like that. I took a sip of my whiskey. But legitimate. Accredited. A place that fills the gap between what emergency responders are taught and what they actually need to know. We talked late into the night, possibilities expanding with each hour. By closing time, the outline of something revolutionary had taken shape. The next morning, I called Robert Mercer. "Remember when you asked what you could do to help me?" "I have an answer now." Creating a training academy from scratch turned out to be even harder than flying through a hurricane. Accreditation requirements, insurance hurdles, curriculum development, finding a facility, securing a helicopter. Robert Mercer's connections proved invaluable. As a successful construction contractor, he knew people who knew people. Gian, we discovered, had been a university administrator before retiring to raise Tommy. She navigated the accreditation labyrinth with practiced ease. The Bayshore paramedics, Sarah and her colleagues, joined our effort, bringing their ground-based expertise to complement our air operations knowledge. Elena designed medical protocols that balanced safety with flexibility. Marcus developed simulation scenarios based on actual incidents where rigid adherence to protocol had led to negative outcomes. 6 months of exhausting work culminated in the Jackson Mercer Emergency Response Academy, a converted warehouse near the regional airport where we'd refueled during the hurricane. We had 1 helicopter, leased, not owned, 4 flight simulators, and a reputation that drew applications from across the country. Our first class consisted of 24 students, experienced paramedics, nurses, and pilots seeking to enhance their emergency response capabilities. On the first day, I stood before them more nervous than I'd ever been flying into combat. "Standard training teaches you what to do," I began. "We're going to teach you when not to do it, when to trust your judgment over your checklist, when saving lives means coloring outside the lines." From the back of the room, a voice called out, "Is that what you did during Hurricane Eliza?" I looked up to see a familiar face, the 3rd Bayshore paramedic from that night, whose name I'd never caught in the chaos. "It's what we all did," I replied. "Every person in that helicopter made the same choice, to see people, not protocols, to value lives over liabilities." He nodded, satisfaction evident. "That's why I'm here." Our curriculum was unlike any other. Beyond the technical skills, which we taught rigorously, we emphasized ethical decision-making, crisis leadership, and what we called resilient improvisation. Students faced simulations designed to force impossible choices, to make them confront the gap between textbook solutions and messy reality. We brought in guest instructors, combat medics, wilderness rescue specialists, disaster response veterans, people who'd faced the worst and found ways through it. Word spread. Emergency services directors came to observe. Medical schools expressed interest in our methods. Even the military sent observers, curious about our approach to training judgment, alongside skill. One visitor, however, was unexpected. I was demonstrating auto-rotation techniques in the flight simulator when Elena appeared at the door, face tense. "Lawrence Brenner is here," she said quietly. "He's asking to speak with you." My stomach tightened. Despite our success, or perhaps because of it, Brenner had continued his campaign against me. He'd tried to challenge our accreditation, had spoken against our methods at industry conferences, had even warned hospitals against hiring our graduates. "Where is he?" "Main conference room. Marcus is keeping him company." Her expression added silently, "and making sure he doesn't sabotage anything." I found Brenner standing stiffly by the window watching as a group of students practiced patient loading drills with the helicopter. He'd lost weight since I'd last seen him, and his hair had more gray. "Director Brenner," I said from the doorway. "This is unexpected." He turned, his expression unreadable. "It's not director anymore, just Brenner will do." "You're not with MediLift?" A tight smile. "Let's just say your media circus had far-reaching consequences. The board decided they needed leadership more aligned with the company's public image." "I'm sorry to hear that. I wasn't sure if I meant it. Are you?" He gestured toward the training yard. "You've done well for yourself, building quite the operation here." "We're meeting a need." Brenner nodded slowly. "Yes, that's why I'm here, actually." He seemed to struggle with his next words. "You were right. Of all the things I'd expected him to say, that wasn't on the list. About judgment trumping protocol sometimes, about the limitations of our training methods." He sighed heavily. "I've spent 20 years in emergency services, Jackson. Always by the book, always careful. And watching what you did, what you risked, made me question all of it." I studied his face, looking for insincerity, for some hidden agenda. Found none. "What do you want, Brenner?" "A job." He straightened, his shoulders. "I've got 2 decades of administrative experience in emergency medical services. I know the regulations inside out, the politics, the funding mechanisms, things your operation could probably use. You want to work for me?" I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. "With you," he corrected. "Your academy is doing important work. Work that could save lives. Not just the patients your graduates will treat, but the responders themselves. Teaching them to make better decisions under pressure might keep them from burning out, from making mistakes born of rigidity." I thought of the desperate nights after returning from Afghanistan, The feeling of being adrift, purposeless. The way flying air ambulance had given me back a sense of mission. Everyone deserves a second chance, I said finally. A new mission. We shook hands, former adversaries, now tentative allies. As I showed him around the facility, introducing him to staff and students, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't experienced since the night of the hurricane. That evening, after the day's training had concluded, I climbed into our leased helicopter for a maintenance check flight. Alone in the cockpit, running through the familiar pre-flight sequence, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From war zones to hurricanes to classrooms. From following orders to breaking them to teaching others when to do either. From the brink of losing everything to creating something new. As the rotors spun up and the helicopter lifted from the pad, I felt that familiar sense of elevation, not just physical, but spiritual. The ground fell away, perspective widened, possibilities expanded. Up here you could see beyond immediate obstacles to broader horizons. That was what our academy really taught. Not just emergency response techniques, but a way of seeing, of recognizing when rules serve life and when they don't. Of understanding that true evacuation isn't just about moving people from danger to safety, but about lifting them from rigid thinking to something more adaptable, more human. The radio crackled. Academy Ops to Jackson. How's she handling? Smiled, banking the helicopter gently toward the setting sun. Perfectly. All systems normal. Coming home. Home. After years of searching, I'd finally found it. Not in a place, but in a purpose. In the knowledge that what I was building mattered. That it would save lives long after my flying days were done. The helicopter responded to my touch. Sensitive, but strong. Like a living thing. Below, the academy's lights blinked on against the gathering dusk, a beacon guiding me back. I'd evacuated many people in my career. From battlefields, from disasters, from medical emergencies. But perhaps the most important evacuation had been my own. From the prison of protocols that valued systems over souls, from the indifference that placed policy above people. Some evacuations aren't measured in miles, but in mindsets. Some rescue. Missions save the rescuer as much as the rescued. As I brought the helicopter in for landing, students gathered to watch, faces upturned in the wash of the rotors. Tomorrow's rescuers, learning not just how to fly, but when to break the rules that bind us to the ground. I set the bird down with feather-light precision, shut down the engines, and stepped out into my new life. The one I'd risked everything to create. The one that finally felt like coming home.